How about now? Okay, I think I got audio now. Let me get the video working. Oh, okay. We should be good with audio and video now. I have no idea why why everything stopped working all of a sudden. And there was like firmware updates and driver updates all over the place this morning. So I was dealing with that. That's why I started the stream a little bit later. But anyway, welcome to my photography chat live stream where we talk about photography, catch up as a community, and see how everybody's doing. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. And I guess let me just go right to the chat section. Generally, I like the audience to drive the conversation for the day. So if you want to talk about any particular thing or if you have any questions, photography related, I'll do my best to answer them. I'm always here to help. And of course, if you enjoy these streams, if you've been coming a long time or you're new here, and enjoy the stream, you can support my efforts using any of the links below. I have, particularly now, it's a good time for early holiday shopping. There's a lot of Black Friday deals out already. So check out my links below to see my sort of consolidated lists that I put together. And also, you can become a member for 99 cents a month. That also helps quite a bit. And anyhow, and participating in the stream itself in the chat section, which doesn't cost anything. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to be a member or anything. You can just participate, and that's also a great way to show your support. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so let me open up the chat window, and I need to adjust my camera just a tiny bit. Oops. Yeah, something like that. That's good. All right. Where's my chat window? Here we go. So first up, Anthony, right away with a question. Jimmy Chang did of Red 35 did a YouTube video on what improvements he wants to see with the new next flagship for OM systems. I did see that video. He didn't talk about specifically what setups, if I recall. It was more about it needs to be better than what's out there, right? Compared to say the very recent releases of the Canon R6 Mark III and the Nikon Z5. I think it's a Mark II, in that they're priced very competitively against, say, the OM1 flagship and are nearly as capable. So to that end, I don't disagree. They're very capable cameras and do have a lot to offer and are very similar. Now, I didn't deep dive into the specs on those cameras, but I believe the R6 Mark III is now a 33 megapixel camera. It does have a similar feature like Pro Capture, and it'll do 40 frames per second in electronic shutter. Now, it is not a fully stacked sensor or even partially stacked as far as I know. And so you will have some rolling shutter issues. But don't let me I don't want to attack the camera without using it, right? Or knowing anything about it. But I'm just guessing, right? As a sports action wildlife photographer, rolling shutter in fast moving subjects is a big deal, right? And that's something the OM1 certainly has a big advantage. Now, the Z6 Mark III, I'm sorry, the Z5 Mark II has a partially stacked sensor, which does improve with the rolling shutter effect. To what extent, I don't know. I've never used the camera. Uh, but I believe that's a 24 megapixel sensor, right? So it's not quite, I think, as competitive as the Canon. And I don't think the partially stacked sensor readout speed is all that much faster than Canon's own 33 non-stack sensor from what I've seen. They're very, very similar. So they're both going to give similar performance with sports action wildlife. And so there's that. And then ultimately, a full frame camera can deliver better image quality if you pair it with focal equivalent, focal length equivalent lenses. So, 25 millimeter on micro four thirds, you'd have to buy 50 millimeter on full frame. And when you do that, you do get ultimately a better image quality out of the full frame systems because they're just bigger pixels ultimately, right? Less pixel pitch. So from a image quality standpoint, I think there's definitely some clear advantages to full frame. And you know, so and the price points, I think the Z5 is around 2,500 and the Z6 III is 2,800. And the list price on an OM1 is like 2,300. You can get them for like under 2,000 now, I think, on sale, but it is still priced substantially less either way, even at the full list prices. So you can add a lens like a 12 to 40 Pro to an OM1. So I think there is still a significant price advantage to the OM1, and the image quality difference is minimal, right? At those price points, because you'd have to buy, say, the 24 to 70 f4 or whatever it is for the Nikon, and Canon has a what is their kit lens that's semi decent? It would have to be their 24 to 105 f4, I think. In which case, the price points are dramatically different, right? When you add those lenses onto those bodies. So I don't think it's still an apples to apples comparison when we look at price point. Oops, excuse me. So it's always a matter of, what do you get for the price? And, when you pair up those lenses with those bodies on the full frame and pair up a 12 to 40 Pro on an OM1, I think the price difference is over $1,000 easily. And in Jimmy's video, he kept saying, what can you get for 3,000? And I don't think you can get either of those new full frame mid-tier cameras with a lens for under 3,000. You're going to be well over $3,000. So, all that said, um, I understand the underlying premise that full frame and other camera systems, including APS-C, are very, very competitive uh, across the board between, at the $3,000 price point. And he says that the next flagship has to be wow, right? Has to be the wow camera or something magical, as he puts it. Uh, I don't know. I think right now I would still prefer, and maybe, I'm in the minority, I know, because the market share is 3%, right? Or something like that for Micro Four Thirds. I still prefer the Micro Four Thirds system over any of those cameras. They don't interest me at all. I look at them out of curiosity because this is what I do, right? I love photography. Uh, I'm an enthusiast and professional on weekends, or not weekends, but whenever I get a job, you can call me a professional. They've been kind of far and few between lately, but uh, I, you know, when I pick up my OM1, OM3 cameras, I know I'm ready for anything. I can do anything, go anywhere with those cameras in a much smaller compact system. Uh, and I know the image quality will be fine. The autofocusing is fine. I took out, okay, I did do an event this week, my OM3 side by side with my Canon R8. And I paired the OM3 with the 12 to 45 f4 and 35 to 100 f2.8. And it handled all of the video and the majority of the photos. the Canon, I did some video and some photography with it. Uh, the biggest challenge that I ran into with my Canon R8, they're still on my desk here, actually. I haven't moved them. So this is the basic setup I use mostly. Uh, I didn't even I didn't even pull out the 50 millimeter 1.8. This this lens is 24 to 105. This is the kit version. It's like an f4 to f7 or something. I don't know, whatever it is. It's the $300 lens. Uh, so this did some of the video, and I was doing 4K. Uh, I need to go a little bit further out so you guys can see. Uh, I was charging the battery, but relatively compact. And then my OM3, let me do that. Okay, here's let me switch back to this other camera. So here's my OM3 and Canon. Yeah, semi-equivalent. We're gonna get very similar images out of these two cameras. This is a 24, or this is 24 megapixel, this is 20. And they both do 4K 60. I was recording in 4K 24p because it was very low light. And let me tell you, this Canon was very frustrating to use. Uh, and that's why I got only a little bit of video and a little bit of photography with it. And it's not user error, okay? This was the camera failing on me at the event, particularly the battery. The battery in this thing was the first problem. I went through two full batteries and had if the event lasted any longer, I would have had to swap to a third battery. I know. I knew that getting this camera, everyone said the battery life sucks on it. But I was only doing things for about 2.5 hours at this event. And I was going through basically a battery an hour. The OM3, okay, I recorded 2 hours plus of 4K 24 video and took almost 2,000 raw images. And I still had like 20% battery on this. Okay. Uh, I could easily gone another hour probably with this camera with a mix of video and photography. So that's one. Number two, this guy, the reason it got so little video is because it kept overheating. 4K 24, and I'd be 10 minutes into the video and it would start to overheat and shut down. And then I had to wait about 10 minutes before I could start recording video again. And the camera wasn't hot to the touch or anything. I was like, why is this thing overheating? So, and the reason I brought the Canon, I wouldn't even have bothered to begin with, but I'm testing out a flash for it. So I wanted to do some flash photography with it for a video review I'm doing later. So that's why I brought it. And I said that'd be a good opportunity just to try and use the camera for real, right? Instead of just playing with it all the time, once in a while. Uh, so from a workflow standpoint, the camera had a lot of issues. Now, I was thinking about after that experience of trying to use it in real life, like at a real job, um, you know, I started thinking, okay, do I get the R6 Mark II? Like I can get a used one for 2,000 and I can get about 800 bucks for that one, right, on trade. Uh, and I only have two lenses for it. I have this 24 to 105 and then the 50 millimeter 1.8. That's really all I need for anything I would do with it. Uh, that that but I'm like, why bother? When I looked at the images and the video that I got out of my OM3 for this event, they're fantastic, right? I had no issues at all with the quality. Even comparing them side by side, there was really no difference. Now, in terms of autofocus, the video I was doing manual focus anyway because it was just a presentation. So I didn't want to activate the autofocus because people kept walking in front of the camera, and you know how that goes, right? So I had it in manual focus, but I did use it autofocus time to time. And I will say the Canon autofocus was a bit stickier on the things that I was shooting. I wasn't shooting people. I was shooting some of the displays and things that they had there. And when I was moving the camera around and panning, the Canon was stickier with the autofocus, meaning it didn't lose focus on the objects on the table and on display and stuff. Whereas the OM3 got very distracted easily. It would be focusing on one thing, and then it would start hunting for whatever reason, and then refocus, and it would be proper. So the B-roll cam that I took that day at the event was better on the Canon because of the autofocus. Uh, and I've been saying this for a long time. The autofocus needs to be better on OM system cameras, particularly the tracking and things like that. For normal things, sports action wildlife, it's perfectly fine. More than good enough. It's excellent, right? But for everyday type things like I was doing at this event, it was a little tricky. And I was in low light, so uh, it needs to be stickier and better. Uh, but that doesn't stop me from using it, right? I can if I overdo it on B-roll. I take more than I need, and then I got plenty of cuts that I can use. And then you overlay with some slideshow stuff, and the final result video will be seamless. Yeah. But yeah, so and yeah, I understand. I'm comparing sort of a higher end Micro Four Thirds with an entry level full frame. But this camera is supposed to be as good as an R6 Mark II, save for the battery life and the overheating issues, which an R6 Mark II would probably solve. And another thing this camera has a problem with, and this came up because I was testing the flash for it, is when I'm doing focus bracketing, you can't use flash with focus bracketing. And I looked it up, and only like the higher end cameras, like the R5 Mark II, uh, I don't know about the R6 Mark III. That I didn't check, but every Canon camera cannot do focus bracketing with flash, not that I'm aware of. On the mirrorless side, you have to get the R5 Mark II. Don't quote me on that, okay? I'm not as familiar with the camera lineup. But when I was looking around, I was like, okay, if I get the R6 Mark II, can I do focus bracketing with flash? No, you cannot, because focus bracketing goes into silent shutter mode, and you can't use flash with silent shutter on a Canon at all, right? Or at least not on this R8 and R6 Mark II and a few of their other ones, the older R5 Mark I. These cameras can't do flash with silent shutter. OM1 or an OM3, you can go up to 1/100th of a second. EM1 Mark III, you can go up to 1/100th of a second silent shutter with flash. Hence, do focus bracketing, in-camera stacking, things like that. Because the R6, this R8 will do in-camera stacking. Haven't done it a lot because it doesn't use flash. But so there's three major knocks on that right there that stepping up to an R6 Mark II or Mark III would solve, right? But anyway, I get it. You know, these all these cameras at these different price points are very competitive, but I still think the OM System Micro Four Thirds still offers some very, very distinct advantages, particularly in macro and wildlife. And now it makes sense that OM System is focusing on sports action wildlife because that's where their strengths are. And it there's a lot of talk about, why don't they come out with a tiny compact camera? Uh, it would sell like hotcakes, things like that. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure because Fuji just dominates that market, right? When you talk about Canon, nobody talks about like the R50, the C50, all these little tiny cameras. I don't really hear much chatter about that. I never see anyone with them in the field. I've never seen an R50 in the field, like their tiny cameras, the R100s. Uh, and what else? What else do they have? Basically, let me bottom line it. Fuji's the only one that can do it. They're the only ones that seem to be able to crank out these little XM5s, XT50s that are very capable little cameras and do well. X100V, the Ricoh, they're almost non-existent, but they're very popular in their niche. Uh, the little GR4s, GR3s. I don't think, you know, Canon, Nikon, Sony, any of these guys can get into that market. I mean, I know Sony has like the ZV-E1s and E10s, and they have their compact cameras. But yeah, I don't hear the buzz around those cameras like I do with Fujifilm. So for OM Systems and Panasonic to try to get into that market and beat Fujifilm at it, or take any significant share away, I think would be a mistake. As much as I hear people clamoring for that from Micro Four Thirds and how great it would be in that niche because of the smaller sensor, you can make a smaller camera that should have better performance. That's not enough. It's just not enough. I feel like they've lost that market, and I don't know if coming out with something like that would do well. Just nobody's going to pick, a compact camera, and they're not. They're not even picking the ones from Sony or Nikon, and Nikon doesn't even offer anything that I'm aware of. And then Canon. Nobody's picking the Canons over Fujifilm. So yeah, I don't think smaller cameras are the answer. I think they need to continue focusing on street photography. Like OM3 is an awesome street photography camera, and sports action wildlife with the OM series. I don't know what innovations they can come up with. Maybe try to squeeze in 25 megapixel stack sensor, like similar to the G9 Mark II, which is non-stacked, but it's a very fast sensor. Uh, and can be had for pretty cheap right now. It's on sale for like 1,500. It's crazy. So I don't know, Anthony. I mean, what do I want in the next camera? Yeah, I wouldn't mind 25 megapixels. I wouldn't mind some computational features that can be combined, like the ND filters combined with high-res shot mode, combined with live ND, combined with graduated ND, combined with in-camera stacking. Imagine high-res shot mode combined with in-camera focus stacking, right? That would be amazing. Combine, live ND with grad ND and combine that with high-res shot mode. Or think of something totally new, even, right? Do do things like that on the computational side. The other thing that I would like to see is what I saw in the Insta360 cameras with the AI things. I mean, that thing has an active HDR mode, right? And it does a really good job. Uh, I mean, it's just doing HDR in real time somehow, and it's great for video work and vlogging. And even in photography, it does a decent job. I still prefer to manually process my own HDR exposure blending type images. I'll share with you a couple images I did this week, but I think that would be a really nice addition. They're going to need more powerful processing. Another nice addition would be the hand recognition and voice control that the 360 cameras have. Like I just have to put my hand up like this to record a video, I think, and do this to take a picture or whatever the hand gestures are while I'm looking at the camera. Or I can just verbally say, take a picture to the camera, and it'll just take a picture. These 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 are really cool little features that I actually used when I was testing the camera out. Now that video is going to come out next week, but you don't have to watch mine. Emily did a good job with her videos. She has a couple of 2 or 3 videos on the Insta360 uh, little action cam that they have. I can't remember what it's called, but she has some really good videos on that. Uh, it really those are actually really handy features, and then it has some additional computational things in it that I didn't go over. you know, but wow, there's a lot of things I think OM Systems can learn from the 360 cameras, Insta360. If they can incorporate that in addition to some additional computational features and the image quality of a Micro Four Thirds sensor, bump that to 25 megapixels, make it stacked for sports action. Uh, my God, that would be a pretty big wow camera to me. And then combine that with the durability and legendary weather sealing, right, that it has, and ruggedness. I mean, that OM system cameras, unquestionable the ruggedness, and of course the image stabilization is better than everything out there. There's there's very little I think can compete with Micro Four Thirds on a lot of fronts, and add in those additional features. Uh, that would be pretty impressive, and I would buy that in a heartbeat, personally. But as of right now, as of things are right now, cameras like a Z5 Mark II, Z6 Mark III just don't interest me at all, you know, even though I have the option to get one. I have a Fujifilm X-H2. I love that camera actually, but not as much as my OM3, right? Um, so yeah, and there's so many concerns. There's debates about, yeah, the OM Micro Four Thirds marketing, and they're just that there's this pessimism among the existing uh, users of that camera system that just won't go away. And I think that's partially because it's like a 3% market share. I don't share that pessimism. I think Micro Four Thirds can continue and thrive even at this 3% level. They're not a high volume camera, but I don't think they're going to go away if they can survive and be profitable with a 3% market share. What's wrong with that? You know, uh, I think that's perfectly fine. And I see people using Micro Four Thirds all the time. Yesterday, someone in our photo club, they shoot a Nikon. I forget which Nikon he had, but he shoots one of those really nice Nikons. Maybe it's a Z8. I don't remember what he had, but he's a Nikon shooter and he's all in on Nikon. And I found out yesterday he bought an OM1 with a 60 macro. It's going to come in this weekend for him. And the reason he bought it is because he wanted to do macro photography, and he really liked the idea of the smaller, lighter system, uh, even for wildlife. He's considering it, but he wants to start with macro. And I can tell you that for macro photography, I still think Micro Four Thirds is the very best system out there. And he bought it used. He got a really good deal. He got the OM1 with a 60 macro and I forget what the third lens was. He got two lenses and the camera for $1,000. And that's less than what he would have paid for if he bought a macro lens for his Nikon. And he felt he would get better results with the OM system camera setup than he would if he bought a macro for whatever Nikon camera he was using. And I agree. I agree with that assessment. He's definitely getting a better macro setup. So, you know, maybe, the other argument, not argument, but the other aspect of this is, or perspective or opinion is that OM Systems is really only catering to existing users of the OM system camera, and those are the only people buying the system. And they need to do more to try to attract new people into the system. Now that I agree with wholeheartedly, because the only people I feel like really buying into the system are mostly people that are already familiar with Micro Four Thirds, are fans of Micro Four Thirds, and for ergonomic reasons, being smaller, lighter overall, and ultimately cheaper, I think. They prefer Micro Four Thirds with just very, very minor compromises in image quality, relatively speaking. But what can they do to attract new business? They need a sub $500 camera or sub $800 camera with the tariffs that are happening now. Uh, they need, the EM10 Mark IV is just too old now. No phase detect. Uh, it's just too old. They need an entry-level camera that people can buy the body for maybe $500, throw a kit lens on for another 200. So they need like a $700 camera with a kit lens that is basically an OM5 or better than an OM5. The OM5 is long in the tooth. Terrific camera, but uh, it's a bit long in the tooth also. The OM5 and the OM5 Mark II. I love the camera. I have an EM5 Mark III, very small, compact, all that stuff. But yeah, they're a little bit long in the tooth relative to what else you can get at at $1,100 or $1,200. What can you get? Not a lot really. Maybe an XM5. Uh, but the XM5 is a cool little camera. It's really small. But yeah, I think they need an entry level camera. So what do I want to see next from OM Systems? Honestly, is an entry level camera, something to get people into the system, but it's going to be very capable. You got to have, human and uh, animal detect. These two things, you got to have these things in them. Some kind of subject detect system like in the OM1, OM3, and all of the other computational features. But it doesn't have to be weather sealed, doesn't have to be super rugged, right? But it needs all of these other things. And it needs to be at a price point that people can get in. Because right now, people are going to go buy a Canon R, what is it? An R10. Canon R10 is like $1,000, right? And that does a lot, that camera. For $1,000, you get a lot of camera. The Canon R50 is like around $600 or $700. The Sony ZV, whatever, their APS-C camera. That's okay. I wouldn't recommend that camera. But, it's at a price point, it has features that a lot of people are looking for. But I think, if somebody came to me and said, "I got $1,000, what do you recommend?" I would say Canon R10 with a kit lens, okay? That's a very capable little camera. Uh, OM System just doesn't have anything. Yeah, get an EM10 Mark IV with a kit lens, but you're basically buying like a 5-year-old camera, if not older. I would argue maybe 8 or 9 years old because the EM10 Mark II, that camera's like 10 years old now. I don't see the EM10 Mark IV really being much better other than having 4K and a few more megapixels. So their flagship cameras, you know, that needs to be evolutionary. I think they're already very capable. What I really like to see next is an entry level camera. Call it the OM20. They don't even need to call it an OM10. Call it the OM20. Uh, I better check. I gotta check something. Okay. Sometimes people text me when there's a problem with my stream, so I just have to check. All right. Anyhow, gosh, that was a long talk on just just that. Sorry about that. Okay, and I see Darko's here. Good to see you. Uh, Darko says, I'm tempted by the Z7 II being on sale. I thought you already had a Z7 Mark I. I don't see a reason to buy a Z7 Mark II. What is tempting you about that? Uh, the only thing it really added was dual card slots and a little better autofocusing, but it's not so much better that I think it's worth upgrading from Z7 Mark I. Uh, but if there's some specific thing that the Z7 Mark II will solve for you, I'm curious what that would be. I don't know what the Z7 Mark II does that the Z7 Mark I cannot. Uh, I've not been in a live stream late due to work busy. Oh, no, no worries. No worries. And good morning, Robert. Good to see you. Paul, good to see you. Especially to Darko. Well, okay. You guys are talking about the weather. Yeah, we're pretty tempered today. Probably 18 Celsius, right about 65 degrees today, I think, or low 60s. Thomas is here. Good to see you. And Heather here from Atlanta, 72 or 74 later. Nice. I'm thinking about moving further south. Maybe someone said don't move to Atlanta, but it looks really attractive there weather-wise. Okay. Uh, Henry says belong to me and I belong to you. Okay. Let's see. Good morning, Wayne. Jeff Painter, good to see you. And from Slovenia. Wow. I always follow your great channel now live for the first time. I wish you all the best. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wish you the best as well. And good morning, Plug Nichols. Wow, I have not seen you here in a long time. Good to see you again. Or maybe it's just I'm used to seeing the usernames and not these the not so new thing, but the YouTube is now using, as was discussed in the chat, handle IDs instead of usernames. And Jeanette, nothing beats starting a Sunday afternoon with the audio off. Jeanette, how are you? Been a long time. But good to see you again. And John follows. Motto, don't do anything before a live stream. I couldn't help it. It wouldn't let me open the app without doing the update first. It's really frustrating. And the ads are attacking, yes. Uh, Rob would appreciate your thoughts on the G9 Mark II versus the OM3 versus the M1 Mark III. Okay, of the three, we can immediately cross off the EM1 Mark III. Okay, because it doesn't have the subject detect and autofocusing of the other two cameras. The other two cameras have better autofocusing. Jimmy mentioned something about the human eye detect is not as good on the newer OM cameras as the EM1 Mark III. I I haven't experienced that personally, but uh, my opinion, we can cross off the M1 Mark III. Now, between the G9 Mark II and the OM3, this is going to be strictly based on form over function. Which form factor do you like better? Do you like a camera with a grip on it that has much better handling and ergonomics? G9 Mark II. If you like the style and aesthetics, uh, the OM3. I- You know, and the G9 Mark II is substantially less expensive right now, about $300 less than an OM3, and arguably a more capable camera uh, with better ergonomics. So, especially in video. So, of the three, I mean, of the between the two, if you like the aesthetics and form factor of the OM3, uh, and don't need state of the art or the very best video, then I would get the OM3. But if you're going to be handling the camera more and want to grip and doing more sports action wildlife, I think the G9 Mark II is the better choice of the two. But performance wise, image quality wise, feature wise, they're pretty much equivalent except on video. The G9 Mark II is going to be way better at video than the OM3. If you want to get into open gate and, you know, you like to do color grading and all kinds of things you can do with the G9 Mark II, the in-camera regular video is even better, sharper, nicer colors. Well, colors is subjective, but a lot of people like the G9 Mark II for video, and the autofocus is pretty close. I might give an edge to the OM3 when it comes to autofocus in sports action wildlife, but the G9 Mark II is certainly capable. And then nothing that a little bit of skill wouldn't overcome quite easily, right? Skill always trumps technology, but uh, the other thing is, yeah. So that's the way I look at it. And then Schweppe says, is it worth it to say small and light with the 75 to 300 or upgrade to the 100 to 400 for the reach and being able to use the 1.4? Uh, yeah, that's an apples and oranges argument. The 75 to 300 versus the 100 to 400. The 100 to 400, it's not only more reach and teleconverter. Forget about the 2.0. Get the 1.4. The 2.0, that lens is not quite sharp enough. Well, anyway, forget about the 2.0. But the 100 to 400 is going to be sharper. It has more reach and is, I believe, a little bit faster in the aperture department in terms of light availability. But they're pretty close. Then the 75 to 300. Uh, so from an optical standpoint, the 100 to 400 is better in every way. It also has image stabilization. So you add image stabilization and teleconverter compatibility. It is the superior lens for sports action wildlife. Now, you started the question off with, is it better to stay small and light or upgrade to the 100 to 400? That's more subjective. Okay, that's a little bit more subjective. Objectively, the 100 to 400 is better lens. Subjectively, are you going to take out the 75 to 300 more often because it is smaller and lighter, or are you going to take out the 100 to 400 because you want the better image quality or the better performance? Uh, that's only a question you can really answer. For me personally, I'm a 75 to 300 guy all the way. Image quality is good enough, reach is good enough. I don't need 400. I don't need, whatever you add 1.4 makes it 500 something. I just don't need that. When a subject is that far away, you run into other problems like atmospheric distortion, especially in the summertime, haze, all kinds of problems with trying to take a picture of something that far away. On a clear day, yeah, I mean, ultimately, more reach is better. But for me, 75 to 300, because I'm going to take that lens out more often and take more pictures and enjoy the experience of taking photos with the 75 to 300. And the image quality from that lens is good enough for what I'm going to be doing with it. Now, when I want ultimate image quality, my opinion, skip the 100 to 400 and save up for the 300 millimeter f4. That's the way to go. People talk about, it's nice to have the flexibility of being able to zoom in and out. Uh, but when you're doing, if you need reach and autofocusing speed, the 300 just blows away these other two lenses, and it's well worth saving up for. Even if you can get a used one in mint condition, if you don't mind buying a used gear, you can find them in mint condition for like $2,000, I believe, but substantially less than buying a new one. That's the way I would recommend. And of course, get the 1.4 teleconverter with it. Then you get the 420 reach. So the key advantages over the 100 to 400, much sharper images, faster aperture, constant, and much faster autofocus. And optically, overall, uh, I mean, it's hard to tell side by side if you were to take a 300 millimeter image with a 300 millimeter image from all three lenses. If you just take a static shot, right, of a tree or whatever at 300 millimeters on all three of these lenses, you're going to be like, what's the whoop de doo? Why would I spend, if I can get this lens for 500, why would I spend 1,500 for this 100, 400? And God, why would I spend $3,000 for a 300? Yeah, okay, if that's all you're going to do, right? But trust me, in the field, when you're using these three different lenses, there is a huge difference in the performance of these lenses when you're doing sports action wildlife. And the 300 f4 just blows them all away. Optically, autofocus performance, size and weight, I believe the 300 is actually a little smaller than the 100 to 400. And you'll find you don't need to zoom out very often. You just get a little better at tracking, and it doesn't take long. I mean, after a few outings and a little bit of technique of using the hot shoe as sort of a line of sight for parallax, because a lot of times, I'll be looking over the hot shoe and lining that up with the end of the lens. And then when I put my eye to the EVF, the bird is right in there. It's right in the frame. So I've gotten pretty good at tracking. Takes a little time, but then you find you don't really need to zoom out and zoom in if you're trying to track something far away. So yeah, it's a much more subjective question, but I would save up for the 300 and skip the 100 to 400 if you already own the 75 to 300. If you didn't have the 75 to 300 already, I would get the 100 to 400 with teleconverter. That's an excellent combination and offers weather sealing. If you want to add that on, the 100, 400, and 300 are weather sealed. But having the 75 to 300, because I had to make that same decision a few years ago, and ultimately I tried both lenses, the 100 to 400 and the 300 f4. Ultimately, I decided to spend more and get the 300 f4. It was worth reaching, and I paid about 2,700, I think, for it. And I traded a bunch of stuff in to knock the price down to about $800, ultimately cash out of pocket. But I felt it was worth it. Okay. And Plug Nickel says, I hope they don't just go the usual route of more megapixels. Give me 16 megapixel global shutter with more dynamic range, and I'll give the ohms. Interesting. So I'm curious what global shutter does for you that 25 megapixels wouldn't be better. Um, I don't know. I would prefer global shutter doesn't. I can't think of too many applications I would use a global shutter over just a regular shutter. Other than, yeah, I can't think of it. But everyone has a different perspective on photography and different needs, right? So let's see. Heather says, you were nice enough to edit one of my photos on a live stream the other day. Can I download your? Oh, okay. Just email me, rob@robtrek.com. So rob@robtrek.com and tell me which picture it was. I don't remember because I delete them every week. So yeah, I don't think I've deleted this week's yet. So just email me. That's no problem. And something I'm trying to understand is crop cameras. The sensor is smaller, so it sees less of the scene, a measurement of quantity. But why does it see more zoomed in version of the scene? Okay, I guess the best way. I mean, you're almost there, right? But the sensor, if I put, okay, so if I put a 300 millimeter lens on my OM1 and a 300 millimeter lens, say, on my Canon, the the field of view on my OM system camera is going to be 600 millimeters or double the Canon because the there's so many videos on this that you could watch. But I can't point to one right now. Let me see if I can just do a quick graphic with a pen and paper. Really go old school here. And I'm going to use a thicker pen. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's just say this is a full frame sensor. This is a micro four thirds, right? And we're talking about a 300 millimeter lens. So if I have an object here, let's say I have one of the pyramids in Gaza. The 300 millimeter lens is going to project the pyramid, depending how far away it is, about that size onto the sensor, right? A 300 millimeter lens on a full frame sensor, 300 millimeter lens on a micro four thirds. It's going to project that pyramid the same exact size onto the sensor. So it's going to be like this. It's going to be the same exact size, right? But when you edit these images or export them as a JPEG, you're going to get 20 megapixels here and 24 megapixels there, right? So when you project these, so what you're going to end up with is what you're going to end up with is a 24 megapixel image on a full frame sensor with a small pyramid and a 20 megapixel image on a micro four thirds camera with a much larger pyramid filling the frame. When you look at the JPEGs, right, or export the RAWs, whatever. But the final image, this is what it's going to be. So I don't know if that makes sense. Because we're talking about a 300 millimeter lens. Where people get confused is people are always saying, okay, 300 millimeters on a full frame sensor. So you can use 150 millimeter on a micro four thirds, but that's not how it works because there's 2x crop factor to get the same field of view. Because if you use a 150 millimeter lens on a micro four thirds, you don't get this image anymore. You get this. A little tiny pyramid in there, right? And then you end up with two images like this. Ah, uh, so that's where the confusion is people are constantly saying, okay, I'm using my 25 millimeter lens on my micro four thirds. That's a 50 millimeter on full frame to get the same field of view. That statement is true, but it makes it very confusing. Like the Henry, what you're talking about is you don't understand why is the measurement zoomed in more. It's not actually really zoomed in. Zoomed in is the wrong word. It's actually what's happening is you're cropping. You're cropping out uh, because the sensor's smaller. It's effectively cropping, right? Because a micro four thirds sensor is only this big on a full frame, something like that. So the micro four thirds sensor is cropped in already. You're getting this if you're using the same focal length. Ooh, some tree just broke off, hit my roof. I'm gonna have to check that later. I think it was just a small branch, but it sounded terrible. Anyway, so always think about the focal length, not equivalence. If you put a 25 millimeter lens on a full frame and a 25 millimeter on a micro four thirds, it's projecting the same size image circle, or projecting the image at the same exact size onto both sensors, but the micro four thirds is just smaller. So that's why it looks zoomed in, but it's not. It's not really zoomed in. It's just the sensor's smaller, so it's not, it's just cropped already. So it's no different than in post processing. You take a full size image and then you crop in using the crop tool on in your photo editor. That's the same thing as using a smaller sensor. But I get it. It's confusing because people are constantly doing these conversions when they talk about micro four thirds and full frame or APS-C. I hope that makes sense. And let's see. Good morning, Rob and everyone. Good morning, Alan. And Hiker Dude is back. Hi, Rob. Would you please remind me of the specs you recommend for a Windows PC for editing Lightroom, Photoshop, and DxO? Okay. So the processor is not quite as critical, but any of the new processors in Intel, I'm not familiar with AMD, but if we're talking about Intel processors, you want to make sure the letter H is in there, okay, in the name. They have the newer uh, AI chips, okay, all the better, but make sure the letter H is in it. Uh, and then for the video card, you need a dedicated video card. Again, I'm not familiar with the AMD products, but the NVIDIA RTX series, but you want to get at least uh, a 4060 RTX 4060 or 5060. You don't want to get the anything lower than that. So an RTX 4060 minimum. And then 16 gig is good of RAM, but 32 gig is better. So 32 gig of RAM, particularly when you're working with Photoshop uh, and you're doing a lot of layering and things like that. And you're working with TIFF files, man. Your memory starts getting eaten up fast. So you need 32 gig of RAM, and then for your hard drive, any SSD, but ideally, you want to get a 2 terabyte. A lot of computers come with 1 terabyte, which is fine, but you're going to have to buy an additional 4 terabyte SSD. So if you're getting a desktop, that's easy to do. If you're getting a laptop, you need to make sure you can upgrade internally, add a 4 terabyte SSD, because with Lightroom in particular, it has a lot of overhead in the cataloging system, and you need plenty of space for that, and you need it to be separate from your images so that when Lightroom is accessing the catalog, say off your main C drive, and then you have that external, or not external, but you have a separate 4 terabyte SSD for your images, it's reading off of both simultaneously and not trying to manage everything on a single SSD. So you want to have two SSDs, one for mainly your data and cataloging, and then a second SSD for your images and your media, video and all of that. And that needs to be 4 terabyte SSD. And then for your archiving, you use an external hard drive setup or cloud setup, whatever your archiving, you know, uh, asset management is going to be. Whether it's external hard drives, that's what I do. I have 3 external hard drives hooked up to my computer that does all of my backups and archiving. But some people use cloud, some people use cloud and hard drive. But your main system, you want it like an i7 with the letter H in it. Never get anything with the letter U in it, okay? But get something, get an Intel processor with the late letter H in it, 32 gig of RAM, 1 or 2 terabyte SSD with the option to expand internally, a 4 terabyte SSD, and then a dedicated video card, RTX 4060 or 5060 as a minimum. And you can go higher, 4070, 4080. The only reason you would need to go higher is if you do video work. If you do video editing and grading and lots of stuff like that, you probably want to go to 4070, 4080. But for photography, the 4060 is more than enough. And that's my basic recommendation. And Seraphin is here. Fine with what they currently have. Didn't get something like the OM3 because found they didn't give what you were being charged for. Poorly sealed flaps. Oh yeah, I remember you asked me about that. Low res viewfinder and only 100,000 shutter life. Oh, I didn't know about the shutter life. Okay, so let me take a 1 minute break here. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. My mom. I have to answer because she's like 82 years old. Yeah, you never know, right? And I live very close to her, so if there's any issues, I can just go over. Um, okay. Um, so yeah, this didn't tick enough boxes for you, right? I think the flaps was the biggest deal, right? You didn't like these flaps because you found these to be these flaps. You found these to be not good enough. I mean, I've taken this out in a couple of pouring rain scenarios, and the camera still works. I don't know if water got in there or not, but the camera still works. Okay, good morning, the Great Vanzini, and the XM5 about the same size as a Canon 6 Mark II. Oh, the old M6. I had an old Canon M camera before. I sold it because I never used it. But yeah, the XM5 is really small. It's like this. It's crazy. And Moxie says, or Heather, I should say, Atlanta is great except for traffic. If you can drive off hours, not so bad. Yeah, I'm going to live well outside of Atlanta. I'm not moving into any kind of major metropolitan area when I retire or move to my next location. I cannot I cannot deal with the traffic. Don't get me started. Oh, I'm just tired of it. David Black says, "Good morning, Southern India. How about an EP7 replacement for entry-level camera? That would be interesting." I don't think the EP7 had an EVF though. I think it needs to have an EVF. Hi Rob. Oh, John Thomas, good to see you from Southwest UK. And Thomas says, an irony of Jimmy Chang's video, after talking about what Michael Four Third needs to do in 2026, he concludes the video, it's not the gear, it's the photographer. Yeah. Uh, well, photography and gear are really separate subjects, right? Photography can be anything, a little box with a hole in it and some film. I mean, photography is a whole different subject, in my opinion, from gear. Photography gear is different. So I'm impressed with how good the 75 300. I am too. It's such a good lens. And Linda says I do neither macro nor wildlife, so maybe it's time to move on. Maybe if you don't use any big lenses, uh, but let me tell you, the if you want a fast uh 2.8 lens on a full frame system, and there's not too many available on the well, Sigma has an 18 to 50 2.8. That's pretty good. So if you want to go APS-C, like a Canon R10 with a Sigma 18 to 50 2.8, that's a really nice setup for about 1,500 bucks or less. You know what I mean? Very, very capable. If you want full frame, then you'd have to get like some kind of kit lens, like like this 24 to 105 on this Canon. I mean, this is still pretty massive lens, right? If I take the lens hood off, you can still see. Say versus my OM3, I'll extend this out, but these are for all intents and purposes, these are equivalent focal lengths and speed. But it's just and this is a far, far more capable camera than that one. But let's say you get the R6 Mark III with this. I think it retails for $400. You're still talking about 30 over $3,000, a little over $3,000 to get something that's as capable as this. You can get this for, I think it's on sale right now for $2,100. And this, I think, is equally as capable as an R6 Mark III with its 24 to 105 kit lens. I would still much rather have this, and this is going to be over $1,000 less money. Uh, in size and weight, of course, this one is smaller. But the R6 Mark III, I will say, would probably give you a little better image quality. But if you're not doing macro or wildlife, I don't know how much more quality you need. Because macro and wildlife, that's when every pixel counts, right? For street photos and everyday type stuff, every pixel doesn't really count. Uh, Macro and wildlife, every pixel counts, and Micro Four Thirds really is, I think, has a significant advantage there in macro and wildlife. Marsha's here. Good to see you. Oh, and you mentioned doing everything, landscapes and street photography or events. Yeah. So for landscapes, we have high-res shot mode on the and graduated ND filters and live ND. So I think for landscapes, again, OM Systems computational features sort of will outperform a full frame camera. Um, because I've compared, my 40 megapixel XH2, my 60 megapixel A7R5 against the high-res shot mode on the full system cameras. And yeah, when you pixel peep, the OM system and Sony, there was a difference. Native 60 megapixels trumps 80 megapixels or 50 megapixel high-res shot mode on the OM3. It is better. Surprisingly, the 40 megapixel Fuji was not better, natively speaking, and the high-res shot mode was, not worth the effort. Uh, with the workflow of doing high-res shot on Sony and Fuji, it's not worth the effort. I'd rather just work with the native 40 and 60 megapixels. But ultimately, yeah, OM3, OM system cameras do a better job overall, in my opinion. If we're talking about landscape, I would still prefer my OM3 over these other camera systems. And Eric is here. Me, MTA wants me to take photos of facilities, stations, and trains for their website. When it comes to the type of photography, I assume they want all the photos to look simple edits. Yeah, don't get creative. Don't get creative with uh when we're talking about more industrial type photography or commercial photography. It has to represent exactly what someone would see if they were standing there. So just make sure your lines are straight, your horizons are level, and you can do some exposure blending in HDR that looks realistic, right? To bring, because the human eye automatically adjusts for changing light, right, from dark to light. So you will need to make some good do some good work on the exposure blending or exposure adjustments. But you know, yeah, don't get creative. And a 300 millimeter lens is 300 millimeter lens, regardless of which sensor. Equivalent is probably the wrong word to use. Um, no, I think equivalent is appropriate, right? 300 millimeter lens on Micro Four Thirds is like a 150 equivalent when we talk about field of view. They're not equivalent lenses, they're just equivalent field of view. So you need to be a little more specific, I guess, and say equivalent field of view. Don't say equivalent lens, because that's only half the story, right? When you say equivalent lens. And Marsh says, I love my 75 to 300. I now have arthritis in my hands and it's painful to hold a 40 to 150. Really? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that because the 40 to 150 is not a very big lens either, but sometimes it's just a little bit more just makes all the difference, right? Hi, Rob. One question here. Which is, in your opinion, the sweet spot, the OM 100 to 400 in terms of aperture and focal length? It seems 400 f4 is not the right answer in my experience. So I'm not exactly sure what your question is. Because when you say OM 100 to 400, I assume you're referring to the lens, but then you bring up a 400 f4 is not the right answer. So now you're talking more broadly, what focal length and aperture do we need? Uh, I think we have it, honestly. The 300 f4 is perfect. Uh, I think we're already there. And then we have the 150 to 400 at 4.5. So these are really good. And then the 50 to 200 2.8. I mean, if we were to try to make a 300 2.8, that would be nice. That would be nice. I don't know what that would cost and size and weight would be. I mean, it would be massive though. We're talking about probably 100 millimeter focal ring on the end. A 300 millimeter f2.8, you're talking about a lens this big on the end. Uh, so if size and weight were not an issue, 300 millimeter 2.8 would be awesome. I don't think we really need more than 300 millimeters on a micro four thirds. Maybe a 400 2.8, but God, that would be so massive. I'd rather use a 300 2.8 with a teleconverter, like 1.4, that would make it an f4. Yeah. Uh, so when I need the reach, I'll be at f4, 400 f4. 400 f4 is not bad, but a 300 2.8 would be optimal with the option to put the TC on to be at 400 f4. And Marsh says, I have a travel laptop with LRC and Photoshop. Can I sync my new Lightroom catalog with my desktop? I don't know. I'm not really a Lightroom guy. I use it time to time, but because some of my cameras aren't supported in Photolab, like my Pentax Monochrome, for example. But yeah, sorry, I can't answer that one. And Gord Simpson says, I had really good luck with my AMD RX 9070 XT and AMD Ryzen 5950X 16 core 64 gig. Okay. I'm like I said, I'm not that familiar with AMD, but thank you for sharing that. If it were technically possible, I wonder if it would benefit OM or Pana to come out with a camera that could also use the lens stabilization of other brand lenses to have dual IS on both. No. Uh, the image stabilization is really good in camera anyway. Adding dual image stabilization to get maybe another stop, I think is what typically you see. I don't see the advantage to that, you know? Um, because typically when you need image stabilization, it's going to be for video. For photography, we can make up for it with shutter speed, ISO, maybe get an extra stop time to time in very low light conditions. That might help a little to have dual IS. But it's not just the image stabilization, it's the optics and um autofocusing systems are different in OM systems and Panasonic, and the lenses are optimized for their own system. So I think just adding dual image stabilization is I don't see an advantage really. I mean, image stabilization is really the last thing I think about when I think about a camera. Uh, I mean, I want it. I want to have it, but it doesn't have to be 6, 7, 8, 9 stops for me because I don't do a lot of video. If I need steady video while I'm moving, I'll just use a gimbal. If if I'm a run and gun guy and don't have room or time for a gimbal, then that extra stop is not going to do it. Your technique is going to be much more important when you're hand holding a camera for video. Your technique is way more important than the image stabilization in the camera. It needs to be good, but I don't see dual image stabilization fixing any problems that you might have with technique, not at those levels. And Linus, I'm referring to the suggestion of the R10. Oh, sorry. I'm a bit behind in the stream. If so, really wants to can invest $1,000. How about slightly older body and 2 to 3 lenses? If so, really okay, if someone sorry, I have to get used to these shortening things. If someone really wants to invest just $1,000, how about a slightly older body and 2 to 3 lenses? Yeah, I mean, if you know, and you add that you're referring okay. So I'm guessing you're saying, is it better to buy an older Micro Four Thirds system with a couple lenses or buy a brand new R10 with a kit lens? I would do that. Yeah. I would always definitely buy if I can buy an older system with 2 or 3 lenses that's capable. I would need specific examples to really answer that question though. But like you can get an OM5 with a couple lenses, the Mark One with a couple lenses used for about $1,000. You can do an OM1 with a couple lenses like someone in my photo club just did yesterday. You can get an all-in-one with a couple lenses for $1,000, and that's way better than an R10 and a kit lens that will cost you probably, about 1,000. I do street events. I'm surprised OM doesn't push their cameras for street. Yeah, they did a little bit with the OM3, but they didn't push it hard. I think at some point they're relying a little bit too much on influencers to promote their cameras. I think it's great that they include that as part of their marketing, but everybody takes influencers and well, I hate that word, but creators online on YouTube, they people that watch that take that with a grain of salt, right? Home System needs to do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to marketing their cameras. They can't rely on creators like us. Uh, and I don't think they're doing enough heavy lifting. They're doing a lot of work in supporting people, doing these live streams and things like that, but there's just not enough marketing on their part, in my opinion. And that's partially due to budget, right? I don't know how much they have to spend on budget for marketing and stuff because sending out a camera to a creator like myself, like they sent me the OM3. I don't know how many people's minds I changed or how many new people thought about getting an OM3. I think most of the people in my audience, they're already Micro Four Third users and they either like the aesthetics of the OM3 or they don't, right? So yeah, OM System needs to do most of the heavy lifting on the marketing. And XMeta says, "Hey, what lens are you going to buy for your Pentax system for Christmas?" I've fleshed out that lens system for everything I need. I have the 17 to 52.8 Sigma. I have the 35 macro 2.8. I have the 51.4 classic, and I have the 55 to 300. So I'm pretty much set. The only lens I might consider is the 77. I think it's seven. It's in that 70 millimeter range. For my K3 Mark One, maybe yes, the K3 Mark One. Because I don't have a prime in that range. It'd be like a field of view equivalent. I guess I should practice what I preach, right? But a field of view equivalent of 100 and something, right? 110. Because I remember when I was shooting full frame, I really liked my Nikon 105 f2.5. So I think the 77 would be, and I hear that the rendering from that lens is magical. So I'd love to use it on my K3 Mark One in color. I don't think it would make much difference on a black and white camera. Because people seem to rave about the color rendering of that camera, of that lens. So that would be the only lens I would think about in addition to, but you know the system really well. So what do you recommend? So those are the lenses I have. That's one lens on my wish list for my K3 Mark One, but maybe you can make a recommendation, right? I'd appreciate that because you've always given me the best advice when it comes to Pentax. And Wayne says there's a 300 f 2.8 4/3 lens. Was looking at one on eBay. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. I wouldn't buy it for to use on a micro four thirds system, but it would be great on an older like four thirds camera. Okay, and what is the best place to sell used gear? I need to sell my Olympus 100 or 400 when selling to places like B&H or KEH. I found MPB gives me the best deal. Uh, so I would go there. I get the best prices whenever I get quoted because I just quoted actually this Canon R8 and this lens, and they quoted me 835. I didn't even put mint. I put like excellent condition, not like new in box. Because this is an excellent condition. I seriously doubt I got like 2 or 3 thousand clicks on this that are real. But uh, 835 for this, and they quoted me what was it, $235 for this, which is only something like that, like which is less, just only a little less than I paid for it myself. Because I bought it used, but it's minty. And then when I went to KEH and I didn't check B&H. I did it once before and it was kind of low. So I always do KEH or MPB. So I would check them both and I would take the higher of the two, but generally I found MPB to give me the best deal. The Canon camera is huge, not for me. It is big. It is a big camera. It's not small, that's for sure. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out. A friend of mine bought a Canon R5 Mark II. I tried to tell her to get an all-in-one, but she was shooting a Canon 90D and she wanted another Canon. And she's always complaining, showing me a blister on her finger or how her wrist is all crooked, after holding it all day. Not all day, but like half a day. I just shake my head. I'm like, I told you. I told you. Too big and heavy. And speaking of Black Friday, when does the DxO sale start? It's usually a week before the Black Friday, so check next week. I will be Johnny on the spot when it goes live, okay? But check back with me next week, definitely. And Roger said, didn't catch your earlier comments, but OM system needs to have an entry-level camera. Yep, that moves from their phone photography to camera photography. I agree 100%. So briefly, I mentioned the OM20. They need to make an OM20, something like at $500 for the body or less, and then add a kit lens for like $100, $200. That's what they need to get new people into the system. Because relying on us people, our exit's coming up. We ain't going to be around forever. They they need to get new people, and our kids don't care about photography, right? So they need to get new people. I don't have any kids. And the Gray Vancini says, I've had nightmares on eBay. I've had very good luck on eBay. And for the street, Olympus and OM lenses do not appear to focus as quickly as Panasonic 15 or 14 Lumix lenses. Yeah, the 15 is nice. Even the 30 millimeter Lumix macro will beat the 25 Olympus to focus on the street. That's interesting. Lauren does so much photography, street photography. I mean, he is so dedicated. I look, if you check out his Instagram free feed, it's under the same name. Uh, he's a terrific street photographer and is out there. So I don't take this statement lightly when he says that the 15 and the 14 are faster than the 25 from Olympus. I mean, sight unseen, I would argue with you, right? I would say, how can that be? A native Olympus lens on Olympus body should focus faster than putting a Panasonic lens on it. But when someone like Lawrence says something like this, uh, I don't take that statement lightly, and I would tend to believe him. But I can't say personally that I can tell much difference. My experience between the 25 f1.7 and the 25 1.8, ultimately the 25 1.8 is faster in every way. But I don't do a lot of street photography where I'm comparing the two side by side. I compared them like testing them, right? Like walking around and testing them, but not every day like Lauren. But Lauren's out there like every single day taking hundreds of pictures. I think I missed one here. I'm speaking on the old one to show it's possible in form factor. I think of yeah, it's definitely possible to make one, right? Gosh, what would a 300 2.8 cost? It'd have to be like 5 grand. If a F4 is 2,000, a 2.8 have to be five. Adam says, I don't know how much time you spent on Fuji, but there are any longer lenses I should grab or others you liked. I only have the 18 to 55 2.8. Okay. Uh, the 70 to 300 is very popular and the better lens. I have the 55 to 200. I like the smaller form factor and the slightly faster aperture. So I had a choice between the two when I was shopping for lenses for my Fuji. Budget was a big concern. I could buy the 55 to 200 used for about half the price of a new 70 to 300. So that was the main thing. Well, that was one of the main considerations, tied with the size of the 55 to 200 is smaller than the 70 to 300. And my priority was not reach. right? My priority was in that 55 to 200 range. Going to 300 for me didn't matter. But in your case, if you're starting from scratch, and I think the 7300 brand new is less than 1,000. I don't know what it costs now. Things prices have changed a lot since I've been shopping. But 7300 is what I would recommend for a longer lens. They don't have much else over that. They have their 800 millimeter f8 or whatever it is. You know, they have some longer lenses, but they're not great. I would go with the 70 to 300. That would be a nice complement to your 18 to 55. And the DA50 to 135 2.8. Oh, interesting. Just check ID SDM is alive. The Tamron 70 to 200 2.8. Another fast tele I like. Okay. So I have a 55 to 300. So my gap is in interesting. I don't think I need a 70 to 200 2.8. Not for my K3s. The 50 to 135 is interesting though. That's an interesting lens. I'll look at that. But is that as good as the 70 something? I think it's 77 2.8. That lens has me very intrigued. And then Lauren says to the person considering an R10, I would say go with the Nikon instead. The lenses are inexpensive and distortion correction is done in camera. Canon is not bad, just not a better deal. Okay, so what does Nikon have in that range? The Z50, right? That's pretty cheap. The Z50 is actually a nice little camera for APS-C. Just not a ton of lenses. Um, like I don't know if you can get the Sigma 18 to 50 2.8 on a V mount, but if you can, the Sigma 18 to 50 APS-C lens is amazing. That's an amazing. It's relatively small, it's inexpensive, and it's fast. And optically, it's really good. If I was shooting, if I was shooting APS-C, like my Fuji, I have an 18 to 55, so I don't need an 18 to 50 from Sigma. But because I got it as a kit when I bought my XT30 back in the day. Adam says, I have the 7 Artisan 35 1.4 on the way and already have the 18 to 52.8. Uh, yeah, it's a 2.8 to f4. Is there any longer lens I should look at? Yeah. So the 70 to 300 or the 55 to 200. I think the 70 to 300 is definitely the better of the two. It's sharper, more reach. Uh, it's a little bigger, and autofocus is faster. But like I said, for budget reasons, I chose the 55 to 200 for budget and size. It's smaller and costs less, and will do what I wanted it to do. I don't need 300. If I needed 300, I would have gone with the 70 to 300. But the street camera is the OM5. Just change the screen to tilt only, and you got it. Yeah. Here's marketing. Flood New Year's Eve with OM system cameras in the crowd and get the kids to use it and then advertise. They just have to make the workflow to social media easy via phone. Yes. Um, and Lauren says, "Oh, sure, Lauren. Lauren has been with me since almost like day one and with respect to live streams. I don't know about videos, but I know he's been in my live streams forever. And like I said, he's a terrific photographer. And we exchange emails time to time. And cameras like the EPL are not only affordable for beginners, but even I still like the EPL 6 with the 14 to 42 and the 12 to 50. A small setup for dog. You know, earlier I kind of discounted the EPL 7. Someone had brought that up as an entry level camera. And I said because it doesn't have an EVF, maybe an EVF is not a big deal, to get people into the system. I don't know. I'm so biased towards having an EVF. I overlook the EPL series. Uh, so maybe that is a good idea. If they can make an EPL 7, now that if I think about it, maybe that's the way to get a $500 camera into people's hands. And Wayne says focus speed will also be dependent on the camera body. Am I missing another comment from you? I've already lost track of this thread. Sorry, Wayne. Uh, our exits are coming up. Yes. You are funny. Love my Nikon APS-Cs, but yeah, more lenses, please. Yeah, there's not enough lenses. Definitely. And Adam says, I like your budget and size thought process. I don't need 300, not with my Fuji kit. Your thought process is similar to mine. Budget is always in the background with purchases. Yeah, exactly. The FA77 1.8 might be a little tricky with AF and has some pinky aberrations. Okay. I just remember when I was shopping primes, I go to the Pentax forums and people are just like the 77 is a halo. Lens for them. But I like your idea of the 50 to 135. That's very interesting at 2.8, because that would give me what an equivalent 75 to 200 or whatever, right? That would give me a really nice range at a very fast aperture, which would be really interesting uh, on my K3 Mark I in color. In black and white, I'm pretty content with the wider angles. That's why I got the 17 to 50. But on my K3, I think the longer focal lengths are more interesting in color. And Linda says, I don't necessarily need more quality. Not that I'd mind it, of course, right? Just more smaller cameras with up-to-date autofocus and preferably flip screen. I know most people want the articulating one. Um, yeah, a lot of street photographers they prefer the tilt rather than the flip out, and I get that. I totally get that. I haven't used a tilt camera in so long. I can't I can't say that I miss it. I don't miss the tilt. I'm very content with the flip out. But I get it. And Lauren says the Lumix GX9 is the most perfect street and travel MFT ever made. The OM5 is also very good. I got the $900 deal. Oh yeah, that's right. That was an awesome deal. It brings water resistance and 1/8,000th manual shutter and good grip. The GX9 is very similar, if not exactly the same body as when I had my GX85. And that was a great little camera. I think I traded it to get my 300 f4. I did so many trades back then. But um, the GX9 is an awesome little camera. It just needs to be updated a little bit, right? If Panasonic came out with a GX9, the same size, form factor, they would, I would think they would do very well with that camera. Maybe just give it a little bit of a vintage flair like an X100, and I think it would do well. Next minute says the EPL 6 can have an EVF. I have the VF2 also works. Yes, I have that that little EVF. Uh, but it's so low res. It's not fun. I didn't like using it so much. I like the little yeah, my XC2 has a tilt. That's pretty nice. My XC2, because you're not doing videos, so why do you need it to flip all the way around? Just tilting up and down is good enough. Um, and probably for 90% of your video, tilting up and down is enough. The only time you need to flip it all the way around is if you're trying to do a low angle shot, and I'm talking about photography, then it is kind of nice to be able to kind of tilt the screen down so when you're looking down, you can see it. But that's only good for like when you're trying to shoot down low like this and do vertically. For video, of course, flipping all the way around it makes sense if you're filming yourself. And the flip out screen is also good for doing group shots, right? And you want to be in the picture. But Adam says, what keeps companies from offering more in-camera filters and adjustment? Is it processors and memory or lack of development? I don't know why they don't just put them in. I think it's probably a balance between features and usability, uh, and R&D, right? Because they would have to invest in time, do some R&D to come up with new filters. So I would say all of the above, because then you need more memory. Not much. You wouldn't need much more memory. Wouldn't need much processing because it's a fixed filter. So I'd say it's primarily development dollars. And Linda said, oh, sorry, that's a message to Lauren. And oh, Al is here. You can borrow my 77 if you want to. Yeah, I'd love to try that out, actually. I didn't know you had the 77. Man, if it wasn't so windy today, I'd say let's go out today, but it's like really windy out. When the wind dies down a little bit, maybe we'll go out. And Plug Nickel said the Nikon Z52 with a little 12 to 28 is a very nice little combo if you can work out the electronic zoom. It's probably one of the smoothest zooms I've used. Bit slow though. Yeah, I totally forgot about the Z50 when I was talking earlier about smaller cameras, but the Z50 is a nice camera. That has the original, I think, 20 megapixel sensor from the D500 from, way back, right? And that's always been a very well regarded sensor. And the D50, the 135 shows pretty detailed image, even adapted to an EM5 III, so it should have plenty of fine resolution on a K3 mono. Okay. Why does that keep popping up, Linda? I'm sorry. I keep popping up your messages to Lauren. I mean, Rob, bird photos are definitely good advertising. They're okay. You know who's really good is Tom and Linda. They're much better photographers than I am, or Lee Hoy, by far. These guys are way better than I am. My photography is just okay. It's not anywhere near the levels of these ambassadors. And Lauren says the M10 Mark II lacks the ability to set minimum shutter speed, thus a little bit of concern for street work. But I do like the metal body. I have one. Yeah. For minimum shutter speed, I heard there's a hack about, I can't remember now. My EM10 died this year. It was working fine up until earlier this year. But There was some kind of hack about adjusting the minimum shutter speed in the flash settings that that worked, but it's just been too long for me to remember. And XMET says, sad how Nikon APS-C still does not have any body with IBIS, even Canon, at least the NARS. Really? That's right. The Z50 doesn't have IBIS. You have to rely on the lens IBIS or its stabilization. So that could be why nobody buys those cameras. Like a ZFC, nobody's buying that. It's not only because of plasticky body feel, it's very lightweight, in other words. But that doesn't have IBIS either. And the Z50 doesn't have IBIS. I never see anybody with a Z50. I haven't seen anybody with a ZFC that I can recall. I've seen the ZF time to time, and I see Z8s all the time. People love that Z8, man. That's a uh, sports action beast because they have a lot of great lenses, Nikon for sports action, birding. Yeah, the APS-C, the Z50, but the Z5 is full frame, right? And only the Nikon full frames. Yep. So okay, so let me show you a few pictures. I've been promising that. I mean, we're almost 2 hours in, and I haven't shown a single image. Uh, so I'll just go to my Flickr. I post almost everything there that is of any consequence. So last night I did some fireworks. I had my Canon R8 with me, and this is a composite. I exposure blended this manually. So I took one long exposure to get the shadow details, which is no longer shadow detail, it's just a normal exposure. And then I took another shot, for the fireworks, and then I combined them in Photoshop and blended them manually, just using a brush and some of the masking tools but yeah, so this came out pretty good, and there's pretty decent detail, not much noise. It was processed with DxO, and this is with the 24 to 105 kit lens because I was shooting at f11 anyway. So, and it's the only lens I have, so I didn't have any need for a faster or better lens. This is also the Canon R8. This is 4 shots combined, but all of them were zoom pulls, save for this one. I think, well, 2 shots were zoom pulls and 1 shot was, and 2 shots. Let me start over. 2 shots I did zoom in and out. So one I zoomed in, one I zoomed out, and then 2 shots were static. And I just blended them all together. And I really like how when I was zooming, right at the end of these streaks of light, there's a nice point of light on the ends. So I think what I'll do next time, because I'm going to go back next week, I'm going to see if I can fit a star filter. Well, I can. I'm going to use my, Olympus system, probably my OM3 with the 35 to 100, or my kit lens, 12 to 45. I'll probably use 12 to 45 with a star filter so I can get some really star-like speculars on these streaks of light. Like you can see a little bit here. There's a little bit of star action right in here. But I think that would have made this pop just a little bit more. But I like how this came out. It's very painterly. And then this was an event. This was also the Canon. So I've been using the Canon a lot lately. It did okay. Again, kit lens on stage, so you can see I was at very high ISOs, like 4,000. I should have used a little faster shutter speed because there's a little bit of motion blur here on her face. But I was trying to keep my ISOs down as low as possible, and it just kept creeping up when I increased my shutter speed. This one also 1/100th. 1/100th of a second is totally appropriate for this scene. So this came out good, but I'm still at like ISO 3200. Just crazy. This one here, ISO 1600, 1/100th of a second. A little bit of a silhouette scene. And then these were from the week before, so you guys have seen these already. I think that's it. And then on my Instagram, I don't know if there's anything new here. Not really. I didn't get out this week as much as I wanted to. But whether you go onto my Instagram or my Flickr, I always include the EXIF data. Once in a while I forget, but for the most part you'll see the EXIF data. Like, ah, that's not what I want. I meant to what? But this is the 40 to 150 kit lens, right? The f4 to 5.6. And it's a great out of focus blur in the background. And I think that the overall quality of that background blur is very, very nice. So you can, the point being is you can get background blur with Micro Four Thirds under the right conditions, right? But I get it. I that was sort of that was a kind of a rigged image because the background was like a mile away. So of course it's going to be out of focus. So laugh aloud. I'm still behind, and I see my much too late comments confuse everyone. So sorry. That's all right. No big deal. Wow, the fireworks triple exploded is really cool. Thanks. Yeah. I don't work too hard at fireworks. I just set up the intervalometer, 1 second interval, 4 second exposure. Bam. Good to go. Then I just curate the images, blend them. I'm done. Very straightforward. And our 10 question was an interesting thought experiment. What if I didn't have any lenses in cams? Yeah, if you didn't have anything, uh, and you had $1,000, this is where OM Systems is really struggling because I wouldn't recommend an EM10 Mark IV in this day and age. So they need something in that sub $700 range with a lens. Because I know you can buy the EM10 Mark IV right now for about 700 bucks with a kit lens, but that camera's just too old. There's too many better cameras on the market for that price point. I mean, uh, an XM5 is what, $800. Then you get the $200 kit lens with it. You're at 1,000. And then there's the Canon R10, the Nikon Z50. These are all better cameras than an EM10 Mark IV. I get it. You don't get the live comp and a couple other computational things, but that doesn't make up for the autofocusing, the image quality, all the other things. That Sigma 18 to 52.8 to me is a game changer for APS-C cameras. Uh, that makes APS-C cameras really, really interesting. A Z40 millimeter is low cost. Yep. And a Nikon Z5 at B&H for 997 for body. A Z28 is low cost. Uh, yeah, that's an interesting. That would be an interesting setup, right? So you can buy a used Z5 for about 700, and then you can buy a couple of used 28s and a 40, and you have a pretty compact little full frame setup. Be great for street. I think that would be a nice setup. Next minute says $1,000 and nothing yet. EM53 and a 140150 plus a 25 1.7 secondhand. Yep, that's a good idea. An EM5 Mark III with a 140150 and a 25 and a flash. Wow, that's a good deal. So you got a weather sealed system with a 140150. And then for other stuff, portraits and things, you could use the Godox flash and the 25 1.7. That's a very, very versatile setup for $1,000. And sometimes you can find the OM5 for like $700, $800. I saw the OM5 for about $800 uh, just the other day. And Sammy's has Nikon deals, yes. I haven't checked out Sammy's in a while, but they do have good deals. Am I correct? There's no sharpness slider in DxO. They have another name or method. No, there is a sharpness slider. Uh, so if you're using a compatible lens that they have a DxO optics module for, then you would use the. Let me just look real quick. I've been using it so long I've forgotten. Everything is just, what do you call it? Uh, Muscle memory now in DxO, that I don't even look at the names of the sliders anymore. Let me look at it. I'll show you two places. And Heather has another question while that's loading. Really stupid question. I have a Pelican case for cards. Never get the cards to stay in place. What am I doing wrong? There must be some trick other than pushing them down into the foam. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a Pelican case. Not one I can answer for you. Sorry. Uh, okay. My CXO is still loading, but I'll get back to your question about sharpness. Do you think ARM system will come out with a 75 1.8 kit lens? Whoa, that would be interesting. I don't think so, though. The 75 1.8 is kind of a niche lens. It's a short telephoto at a 150 millimeter field of view equivalent that I don't know who would buy such a lens. I mean, I have a 75 1.8 regular, but I don't use it that much. Uh, so my short answer is no, they're not going to come out with one. There's just not much need for it that I can think of. All right, so let's see. I was working on a pano here. I'm not done with it yet. So under this thing here, we have the sharpening right here. This intensity is the sharpness slider, basically. And then you also have it down here, I believe. Where is it? Maybe it's, give me a second. There's one on another page that I never use. Maybe it's when you do a local adjustment. Yeah, there's one down here too. So if I do a local adjustment like that, I can go all the way down here and increase the sharpening right here. This may or may not be available, lens sharpening optimization. This is tied to the optics module of DxO. So it has to be a supported lens to have this slider. But this slider is always there, but this is for local adjustments only. If you're using an unsupported lens, you're not going to have this. So you're going to have to use the unsharp mask. So there's no sharpness slider if you're using an unsupported lens. You have to use the unsharp mask, as far as I can tell. Okay. Oops. Look at the price in EU. I could, but EU prices just are kind of, I don't have any feel for that, or Canadian. Other foreign currencies, I don't have a feel for what's a good deal or not. They need to lower the prices on the lenses. Look at the price on the 17. Yeah. And did I ever try the Sigma 56 1.4 on MFT? No, but I've used it on the Fuji. Wonderful. A wonderful lens. And every image I've seen, because people used to submit me images. Well, they still do, but I've had people submit images to me with the 56 1.4 on a Micro Four Thirds, for editing, and they're just fabulous. So that is such a beautiful lens. It renders beautifully, and it can be tack sharp when you want it to be. So I can highly recommend that lens if you can get one. Yeah, you need to get a new desktop. I'm all about the laptop life now. I'll never buy a desktop again. And the Nikon Z50 f1.8, 50 millimeter f1.8 is an excellent lens and value. Yes. They have a 1.4 classic also, which is really nice for like 500 bucks, or is that the classic? I can't remember. Nikon has always made excellent 50 millimeter focal length. All of them have been excellent from the AI days, Nikon AI, not AI like we know it today, to their modern lenses. They know how to make a good 50 millimeter. That's for sure. So okay, guys, I think I'll call it here. Um, because I'm getting a little bit too relaxed here at home, just kind of chilling with you guys. I need to get some work done, get my video ready for the. I'm gonna have videos out for this hopefully this week. Well, definitely this week. IT20 on the OM1 or OM system cameras for Micro Four Thirds, and also for Canon IT20 flash for Canon. Where is that flash? But it's this tiny little flash, that you can put on. Spoiler alert, it's pretty good. It does everything they say it's supposed to do. Uh, so hopefully I won't make the videos too long. I could make like a 1 minute video about this flash, but I told them I'd make like an 8 minute. They like at least 8 minutes when you make a video and they give you something. It's not sponsored. I told them just send me one for Canon, one for Olympus, and I'll make a video about it. So I'm gonna do that. And if you want to support my streams again, use my shopping affiliate links down below for your holiday shopping. That would help me out a lot. It doesn't have to be photography related. If it's on Amazon, you can buy anything, right? Over there. So that would be great if you guys did that for me. And then direct donations and all of that, of course. But I really appreciate you guys being here with me today. It's been a fun conversation, and I appreciate your participation. So all I really wish for all of you is to good health, eat healthy, exercise. I want you guys to be here with me a long time. Okay? So thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you all again soon.